on time. That's okay because I talk really, really quickly. So we're all familiar with the dashboard now, things that came out of the spring release. I'm going to sort of cover some of that ground from the spring release and sort of talk through in a bit more detail some of the demos that I showed off and how I built them. So the calendar application that you might have seen me very quickly move through there. Um, what's great about the Sanity App SDK is that it gives us these hooks to do things like data fetching for Sanity documents in a really performant way. Every time we fetch documents, they're always live updating documents. They fetch in batches, particularly, so you don't accidentally write a query for 10,000 documents or you return a whole heap of data that you don't actually need. So it's really focused on performance. So building a calendar like this is just get me all of the events where the start date is on this particular month. And then because we have all of these React hooks for data fetching and data editing, as we'll see in a moment, that means then we can just compose with other things in the React ecosystem. And React, that's one of the greatest things about using React is it has this huge ecosystem for tools. And it also has, and because of its huge ecosystem, it's really great with AI assisted coding. So this calendar UI here, this is using Sanity UI, the Sanity front end framework library, because Sanity UI and Sanity SDK are two different separate things. SDK is only concerned with data fetching, UI is just for front ends. So the calendar application here, I used Sanity UI to build this, but I just coded this with AI. It's not actually using a calendar React component, which is something I got asked a few times. And I did look up a few React component examples, but in the end, I just picked this one and applied some Sanity UI styles to it. So then, like all of the logic and all this was all written by AI to say, as I'm flicking through the month, change the filter for what are the events starting this date. But then I was able to compose this with a React library pragmatic drag and drop. It's sort of the latest drag and drop library to perform things like if I'm going to move this event to a particular day, then that is actually going to modify that date in that document there. So again, this composition that we now have to create applications with the App SDK is really excellent, particularly within the React environment for now, especially. So that's data fetching in this calendar application and how I built that particular one. If we jump over to this map application, so again, I'm using a library here. I think this is React Google Map, I think is the one. And again, this is just using the same hook. So there's a fetch here. The use documents fetch here is just being fed the geographical bounds of this map at this particular time. So it's only ever going to show, oh, can I zoom in? So here it's actually changed the fetch that's being performed here because I've now zoomed in. Grok has functions for geolocated. It has like for geofenced events, and because latitude and longitude is an event type, is a field type in a Sanity document, that means we can take geo points as a field type in a Sanity document and perform a geolocation search. So now I'm not overfetching. It's not that I'm fetching every event document and only rendering the ones that are in this particular view now. It's that fetch has been updated to only fetch for these documents. So again, all of this that we're focused on here with SDK is not just building apps that can fetch, because we've had Sanity Client and you can do Sanity Client fetch since forever. But how can we ensure that every time you fetch, it's real time and it's performant, it's batched, and all of that good stuff. And so this changes here, and I think it actually keeps count. I was looking for, I had it in the UI at some point. It actually counted like how many events were in this particular area. But yeah, so now you can drill down and get more information on this particular application again. But this is just another good example of melding React components, React ecosystem packages, and mixing it together with a React SDK. I think the app that probably got the most attention from the demo is this one, a table-based layout for Sanity content. I think it's both the holy grail and the widowmaker of Sanity app development. Because the Sanity Studio doesn't really have batch operations, everyone's had a go at this, I think. And it's actually true. I built a demo like this maybe over 4 years ago. It was one of the things that I built that sort of put me on the radar to get hired at Sanity. People might remember Super Pain as well by Rico, one of our colleagues here at Sanity. Everyone's had a go at this. And I had a go. And the fact is that I've been making table demos for quite a number of years now, it turns out. And it's never been easier. This one, again, very much AI assisted, very simple to do. And to be able to make batch changes, like it's one thing to be able to edit this document just like that. Like that is literally editing the document, but to be able to grab a whole bunch of things and then let's say that they're all sold out now, like that is doing a batch operation, is happening immediately. We can see that optimistic UI really coming into work because the UI responded immediately, and then that document edit is being performed behind the scenes. And the other really magical thing, if you've built Sanity applications like Love Holidays were just speaking about building their own little apps in the old Sanity Studio dashboard, you had to handle things like, I'm going to create an edit and I'm going to edit this document, but I have to check first, is it published? And if it's not, I have to make a draft. And now I've got a draft that I need to fire off an operation for a publish. And publish actions weren't always great outside of a studio context either. But now we have all of those pieces in place. We have things like the live content API, we have server-side document actions, and all of this is coming together to make apps like this so much faster than ever before. Now, the final app that I want to touch on today is this one here. I think I've shown off this one in perhaps some particular demos. And the reason I want to show you this application is because this is the one that you will build in the newest Sanity Learn course, which I'm going to publish at the end of this segment here. So again, this list of documents here on the left-hand side, this is using the use documents hook. And I thought it might be worth just quickly flicking back and forward between these UIs and the code. So let's go and jump over to the code for this particular one. Here's our use documents hook. And it's this simple to perform what's the same thing as like a client.fetch, but ensure that it's always batched, it's always live updated. Um, I've got some pretty complicated grok going in there. That's just saying, do I have filters or not? Do I have parameters or not? Use them if I do, use them if I don't. And that allows us to do things like filtered searching, like I only want to look at documents that have been assigned to me and only the spam documents, for example. And so you can see how I'm applying those filters from things in my UI to that grok query, and it is reflected in the documents that are being returned. Now, the thing to keep in mind too is that this use documents hook is not returning full documents, again, like you might be used to when you're doing a client.fetch operation. And particularly if your experience is much more in server-side rendered web applications and you're not really used to building single-page applications, you're probably used to, I need to write one huge grok query and get everything all at once to statically build the application or to build my front end rather. But that's sort of, we flip that here in App SDK applications where we just want to fetch these document handles that are returned by use documents is a new concept. So what you actually get here in this data is the ID, the type, the data set, and the project ID of those documents. And then what you would do is pass that down into, I've got a component here, feedback preview, and I'm passing on that document handle. And feedback preview uses a function called, or a hook, sorry, called use document projection. And this is going to take that document handle, which has that ID, type, project ID, and dataset name, and then it's going to get just these particular fields. And so we get in the pattern with App SDK apps of, I'm going to fetch all these document handles, and then each individual component is going to fetch each individual document itself. And that feels like a lot of work, right? If you're used to doing an SSR app and you want to do it all in one go, but this is actually how it's best performed. And all of the under the hood magic of SDK is making sure that that's always performant for you. And there's always little helpful things like this ref here. What this is going to do is I'm going to attach that ref, if you're familiar with those in React, to the outermost component here, which makes sure that this hook only runs when this DOM element is rendered into view. So we have all of those performance things baked into the SDK, which is really, really cool as well. And I can go through all these hooks one by one. This application is using almost all of the hooks that you have. So here I've got a piece of feedback. I've got a use current users hook. Use users hook to get all of the users on this project. So I can assign myself. This only mine filter here is using the use current user hook to get the user ID of the current user. Here I've got a note editing thing. We really should look into this. I can write that. That's being authored to that document in real time now. I've got an assessment button here, and this is going to grab the Sanity client using the use client hook, and it's going to run an AI agent action to check the sentiment of this particular bit of feedback here, and it rates it as negative. It writes that to the document. I can mark that as spam or approve, which is actually doing two things. This is going to update the value of a field and then publish the document. And all of these hooks are being used throughout this application here. And if you want to learn about that, well, let's go and open up our Sanity Studio here. And I'm going to publish this in early access because there's no videos yet, no screenshots. And I would like to make sure that this course has that before we go ahead. And so that is now published on Sanity Learn. So let's go and open up Sanity Learn course. This one's called Build Content Apps with Sanity Learn. There we go. So if you are logged in to Sanity Learn, you'll now be able to access this course and build that exact same feedback processing application that I've just shown there. I'll show you how to set up a new project in Studio and quick start that SDK app. And then hook by hook, you'll work through each one of these hooks to work out what is it best for, how it applies to this particular feedback application, because this is really quite a simple application. We're listing documents, we're showing an editing view, but then there's a whole bunch of little niceties as well. And you'll also get to see explanations of how to think about Sanity or how to think about React applications in a Sanity context. One little gotcha that we do point out there, which I think is worth mentioning, is things like no, where is my application? Things like this field here. If you've built React applications before, you're probably used to writing that to a use state and then posting that somewhere else once you are done. Where with Sanity applications, this has always been true with custom input components, and it's true in the App SDK as well. It's always best just to be writing directly to Sanity and letting those live real-time updates continually refresh the live updated value so that you're never storing things in local state, so that as if I type this into this notes field here, somebody else on another computer who's also looking at the same feedback, they'll see those notes get written in as well. So everything is always real time. You're not accidentally ending up with stale data in the browser or saving over somebody else's work. If we keep everything always real time, it leads to better App SDK apps. And so all those little sorts of gotchas and things you ought to know about building apps with all of these tools are mentioned in that course, but it's very early. There's a feedback form on the course, so please check that out. Please enter your feedback into it. I don't have an application like this for Learn Feedback. I built a very similar version of this in our old Sanity dashboard. I need to update it, although we don't need this assessment button because all the feedback's always positive, which is excellent as well. So if you do try out the course, please let me know. But that's a very quick look at some of the things we've been building with the App SDK.
Thank you. That was a very to the point guide. I feel like I actually didn't know about how the level of performance that is baked in, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, there is so much magic under the hood of what SDK is doing that is great because you don't have to think about it. And all it is really doing, it's repeating patterns from Sanity Studio and just like patterns of good apps. So optimistic updates and like optimistic per render updates. I'm sure it's impressive in ways that I don't actually understand. But the ways I do understand it, it really is very much focused on making sure that it's as easy as possible for you to make performant real-time applications.
Yeah, which is super exciting. Like you said, it's something that you can literally build anything, right? Like you've built all these, you've told me that you've built so many different plugins over the years, and this is the toolkit that you wanted. And some of these things have been possible right before, but it just took more time. So
Yeah,
you shared
you had to
obviously a
handle
bunch.
all of the like the
Exactly.
optimistic updates, like you had to handle loading states and you had to handle updates and refreshes and live listeners and all of this sort of thing. I wrote a hook called use listening query years
Mm.
ago and put it into this like plugin utilities package because I always wanted to make sure every fetch was always live. And then someone else built a way, way, way better version of that. And that's just like one hook in this SDK. So yes, I'm very grateful to have this toy box to play with.
Yeah, and I appreciate you also opening it up to the public, learning, building in the public and letting people in on App SDK because we know it's really been the favorite in the community. What would you say is your favorite hook then? Like there's so many hooks and you go through them all in the Learn course, which is also really nice.
I
Do you have
think
one that's like people need to use this one?
I have a silly answer. I love use navigate to studio document because I love a verbose function name, and this
Mm.
this does it. You can't get functions any longer. And actually, there's an argument to be
That's
made that
true.
in the AI era, a function that's like the length of a sentence and explains precisely what it does is probably actually better for a large language model to understand. So I'm a big
If it's
fan of that.
descriptive,
Structure
yeah.
Builder has get default document node, and that was always my favorite method in the Structure Builder. But I think use navigate to studio document is my new favorite.
Nice one. There were some questions in the chat as well. Russ is asking, are the apps deployed with the studio or are these separate deployments?
So these are separate deployments, and actually something that I probably should show is the Spring Spring. I'm going through my
Oh, the
web browser
code.
history here. This will be interesting. Yeah, I was going to show this too because I mean that first one that I set up. This is sort of an interesting way to start looking at how we work with Sanity projects as well. Is if you're not familiar with mono repos, and I haven't been for the longest time, it's probably time to start getting an understanding of a PNPM mono repo because having your studio side by side with your applications now is really probably the best thing to do. And so with that spring release demo, I have my app, my calendar, map, and table apps all here as separate deployments. Then the studio is its own thing. The functions folder is also separate to this here. I've got my Sanity blueprint in the root of this project. But then what I've set up here is in my package JSON, I've set up a script to deploy everything. So what this will do in a PNPM workspace is it will run the deploy command of every application in your monorepo. So running this command from my terminal here will deploy all 3 apps and the studio simultaneously. So this I do want to open source this code at some point because I think it represents sort of the new model of how you would approach building with Sanity when you've got apps and a studio and functions and a blueprint,
Mm,
which understands a lot of things to now contain. Where it used to all just be the studio, right? Life used to be simple, right? But it is better to
exactly.
break these things into smaller parts, and I think. I mean, we're still forming these opinions because they're all brand new, right? But I think this probably represents the best practice of what it looks like to develop studio and apps side by side.
Yeah, like you said, like we're all still unboxing all of this, even though we did an unboxing on the day of the spring release. Like there's so many new things, right? Like even though it might have been, I mean, simpler to the eye, right? You only cared about the studio, but it's very powerful where you can like have apps that are like very dedicated, like you said, bulk editing apps. Like how cool is that? Like that is something that people have been wanting for ages. So on that topic, do you have the next app in mind that you're building? I know you're building, well, the Learn course is already, all live, I guess, early access.
Yeah,
So,
probably building that feedback processor for Learn is something I actually want to
mm,
do because I do have I have a really basic version of that because I'll get I mean, used to get a lot more of this, but the feedback box used to look like you had to write in feedback to go to the next lesson. So people would just write nice or thanks. And so I'd end up with
mm,
like 50 a day,
which is nice,
thanks
but
or
also it
nice,
doesn't
which is
really.
great. Yeah, it's good for your ego. We minimize that feedback box, so we don't get as many of those now. But I did need a way to sort of like grab a whole heap of them and mark them as positive, or grab a whole heap and mark as finished. Because I do literally read every bit of feedback that comes in on the Sanity Learn platform.
Mm.
And so that's probably what I would like to do is actually build one of these for myself and meet that real world need.
Nice. Yeah. We also have some more questions in the chat. Sorry, we are running over time, but it's tricky to get 3 people speaking in an hour. So I always expect
Yeah,
this to
yeah,
go like a little bit over time.
that's
But
fine.
Graham is wondering, do we need to be on the latest version of Studio to use the new SDK?
No, because the studio is separate from your App SDK apps.
Mm,
Now, I haven't for a while used App SDK inside of Studio, but I do believe it's possible. If there are
right.
issues at the moment, they should be resolved because I believe the design goal of App SDK is that it should be functional in the Studio.
Mm,
But the introduction of dashboard on this has sort of introduced some peculiarities in authentication, and that's sort of something that I mentioned in the course as well. Is that the dashboard? It's not just visual frame; it's actually providing the authentication for App SDK. So again, another
yes.
thing extracted away. You don't have to think about authentication because the dashboard's providing that authentication. So yeah, it's not really dependent on your studio, and really, there's a future coming where because literally you don't need a studio to work with App SDK, and there's probably a future coming where I could have a course that doesn't even involve a studio. The studio is just helpful as well. They're sort of like this global view of all of your content, but
Mm.
because you're writing content to Content Lake, not to the studio is just a window into the Content Lake. I could have written that App SDK course sort of on hard mode and said, we're
Mm.
not using Studio. We're just writing to the Content Lake.
Yeah, you can, right? And some people actually
Yeah.
do. Like I actually found out the other day, like some people don't actually use the studio at all. They literally just use the content lake because that's really where the data is, right?
Yeah.
Which
Just stuff that full of JSON.
yeah, which is like one way to use Sanity, which I think is super powerful. Chris did say though, but to deploy your schema, which the app SDK requires, happens from your studio. I guess now,
Yes.
right? But not in the future.
Well,
That's what you're
yes.
referring.
The App SDK, now App SDK doesn't require schema. TypeGen does, and Agent
Mm,
Actions does require a deployed schema. So again, like in this particular course, actually, I have left out TypeGen for now, just because it's experimental and it might change, and I just don't want to date the course at the moment yet. So I've left TypeGen out. So yes, that's true. You'll need a schema, but you could author that schema in your App SDK app. and generate a schema from there. Maybe not
You can do
today, but
because you
there's a
get but exactly, you get the
yeah.
studio capabilities, right? So you should be able to do everything later
Yeah,
in
there's a future where yeah, Studio isn't the final point of authority on what schema types are available, and you might just be authoring schema separately from a Studio, and that would likely go in a blueprint. There's a future where, like, if we're familiar with functions and blueprints, all of that configuration of
Mm.
your content universe should all eventually end up in a blueprint.
Yeah, and I think, like, if you do have thoughts on how this is working now, how it will work in the future, like, we do have dedicated channels for each of these new features, this new toolkit in our Discord community. So if you do have any thoughts, like, please ask away. Like, our engineers are actually always there. They're helping us answer questions because they're iterating so fast. So it's hard for us to keep track. uh, but I
Yeah.
mean, it's not negative. I'm just saying, like, it's hard to keep track. So
Well, it's funny.
um,
It's just dawned on me that maybe I'm talking too much out of school, but I just want to sort of reinforce that, like, everything is very much working now, but let's sort of think about where this is all headed as well. But you can get an awful long way um, with everything as it is. But yeah, for now, it's probably best to still have a studio alongside your App SDK app. But there's a
yeah.
future where that's not necessary. So just sort of thinking about that there.
Cool. Okay. Well, we actually have two more questions. Is that fine? And I
No,
promise I'm
go
gonna
for it.
let you go.
What else have I got to
Um,
do?
oh, no, exactly. It's not your birthday or something. Is there a recommended way to have a staging environment and production without having to duplicate content between data sets?
Yes. So actually, this came to mind today. So, like, an example of one of the many plugins that I built for Sanity is the cross dataset duplicator. Because, but I was thinking about this today. This is a plugin that I need to go back and update this README and say, hey, I made this before we had live preview, before we had content
Mm,
releases, before we had perspectives. So much has changed. So this plugin, and this is an app that literally, like, I would love to have built this with the App SDK because it needs to query a bunch of documents and then perform a client operation to send those documents and those assets to a different data set. So this is a plugin that does that to copy content and assets between data sets in a way that you can be done in the browser, as opposed to in the terminal. You can export a data set and you can import it into a different data set. But this plugin shouldn't be used anymore, and that's why I need to go back and update the README, is because we have so many better ways to do this. So ideally, if you have content that needs to be staged, then you would write that draft and you would set up live preview in your application, and so you would have a good visibility on what that content looks like before you press publish. So yeah, any of your preview content or previewable content should just be stored in your production data set. And the idea of environments should really just be for messing around with new schemas or new functions, that sort of thing, not necessarily to preview content before it goes live.
yeah. Great. Thank you for answering that. We have two more questions. It's actually so people are so excited, which is amazing. I just feel bad for you, but you love to talk about
That's
SDK.
fine.
So
Let's go.
yeah, I was like, let's do it. I was considering making an app to promote slash copy content between data sets, but thought this must be a common problem.
Oh, I
Do
think I
you
was sort
re-
of addressing that too with this here, is that,
yeah,
yeah, I
I
mean,
realized that now it's tricky to keep up with the chat,
no, it's
but
all right. Yeah, I mean, you could rebuild this as an App SDK app, especially because, and it promotes a good point. App SDK apps can reach across projects and data sets. The Studio
yes.
can't, and that's partly why I built this this tool here, this plugin, is because that's something the Studio couldn't do. So I'm like, but I can make a tool that will do that. And so, I mean,
Mm,
this used to exist in Sanity V2 as well. This plugin's been around for years, but yeah, so an App SDK app actually would do a really great job of what this plugin does. It's just that this way of working isn't the best way of handling variants of content anymore. We have perspectives,
mm.
we have live preview. Better to work with that.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, final question. So
Go
James
for
is
it.
wondering, so if I heard you correctly, the apps are deployed separately, so they'll need their own domain, and we
Mhm.
reference that URL somewhere in the config, kind of like Shopify does apps.
Um, no, so I think the dashboard recognizes itself, doesn't it? Like, because
Yeah, I would say
you are
everything is in the dashboard. Like you will see the apps in the dashboard. Yes,
yeah, you're
exactly.
deploying to the dashboard. So it's all going under your organization's URL.
Yeah, sorry, I
So
saw that Chris had actually answered this already. It's
yeah,
I apologize for going in between, but like keeping track is tricky sometimes.
it's fine. You're being
Uh,
host and producer. It's
yeah.
a tough job.
I realized that it's actually and also on one screen. Like, I
Sure.
wish I had my big screen and everything was a bit set up, but I'm like in between houses, so I'm just staying with some friends at the minute. But yeah, everything is in the dashboard. Like, it's actually all supposed to be very neatly, like, kind of like you can view everything there. You obviously have the media library, you have Canvas that used to be Create, you have the apps you create. Everything is in that. That's supposed to be your new home, basically, like the interface for everything, right? So